When I saw my 78-year-old grandpa hook the keys to that HOA cop's truck and drive it straight into the creek, I knew this war was about to end. But what I didn't realize was that it was just getting started. It all began when Chad Morrison, this self-proclaimed HOA security director, decided that our family land was his personal parking lot. 6 months of him parking that matte black Ram 2500 right at our ranch entrance. 6 months of us calling, writing letters, pleading, and 6 months of him laughing in our faces. But when he touched my girlfriend, that was the drop that broke the dam. Let me tell you the story about why you should never mess with a 78-year-old farmer with 40 years of heavy machinery experience. Drop a comment below about where you're watching from. Now, let's get into this story. My name's Jake Thompson, and before this mess started, life was simple. I graduated from Texas A&M with an agricultural business degree and moved back to help Grandpa Hal run our 200-acre ranch outside Austin. The Thompson family had owned this land since 1923, through the Depression, 2 world wars, and countless droughts. Grandpa always said, when your roots run deeper than your neighbor's fence posts, you don't budge for anyone. Our ranch sat where the old country road met newer subdivision developments. It used to be all farmland, but in the last 5 years, these fancy HOA communities started popping up like mushrooms after rain. That's where Chad Morrison came into the picture. First time I saw him, he was stepping out of that ridiculous truck, all blacked out windows, oversized tires, and chrome accessories. The guy looked like he was compensating for something. He was maybe 6'2", with the kind of build that suggested he used to work out, but had been letting beer do the heavy lifting lately. It was a Tuesday morning in January when he first parked that monstrosity across our main gate. I was heading out to check cattle when I saw it. This massive black truck blocking the entrance like some modern Berlin Wall. At first I figured it was a mistake. Maybe he was lost, GPS glitched. I walked over and tapped the driver's window. When it rolled down, I got my first good look at Chad Morrison. His face had that permanent scowl some folks get from spending too much time angry at the world. "Excuse me, sir, but you're blocking our entrance," I said, keeping it polite. Chad looked me up and down like I was something he'd scraped off his boot. "Your entrance? According to the HOA property survey, this is community access road, public right-of-way." I felt my jaw tighten. This was our land, had been for 100 years. "I think there's been some mistake. This is private property, the Thompson Ranch. We've got deeds going back to 1923. Chad's laugh was like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Listen here, farm boy, times change. This whole area is under HOA jurisdiction now. You got a problem with that, take it up with the board." That's when Chad's demeanor shifted from dismissive to hostile. He stepped out, using his height to intimidate me. "You don't want trouble? Then maybe you shouldn't be touching my vehicle." He pulled out his phone and started recording. "I'm documenting this interaction for the HOA board. Harassment by property owner, attempted damage to HOA security vehicle." I stepped back, hands raised. "Man, I'm just trying to get to my cattle. Can we work something out?" Chad leaned against his truck, arms crossed. "Here's what we're gonna work out, Junior. I park where I need to park to do my job. Your little farm here, it's disrupting the aesthetic of our community. The HOA board is reviewing zoning for this whole area. Might be time to consider selling, moving somewhere more rural." The way he said rural made it sound like a dirty word. I stood there trying to process this. This stranger had just told me my family's century-old ranch was ruining his community's aesthetic and suggested we should sell. "Look, Chad, that's Mr. Morrison to you, farm boy. Mr. Morrison, this is my family's land. We're not going anywhere, but we can be good neighbors. Maybe we can figure out a schedule." Chad chuckled and shook his head. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't a negotiation. This is me informing you of how things are going to be." He reached into his truck and pulled out a clipboard, scribbled something, then handed me a piece of paper. "Here's the HOA's official notice. Parking enforcement. Your little farm road intersects with HOA property. I'm authorized to patrol this area, daily, as needed." I looked at the paper. It was mostly gibberish, legal-sounding words strung together, but nothing official-looking. This doesn't look legitimate. Where's the letterhead? Proper signatures? Chad's eyes narrowed. "You questioning the authority of the HOA board, son?" I felt heat rising in my chest. "I'm questioning your authority to block my family's entrance to our own land." Chad stepped closer, close enough that I could smell stale coffee and cigarettes. "Let me make something clear, farm boy. The HOA owns this community now. Your little plot of dirt is surrounded by our property. We control the access roads, utilities, zoning. You want to play hardball? Go ahead. See how long you last." With that, Chad climbed back into his truck, fired up that obnoxiously loud diesel engine, and drove off. But not before leaving something on my windshield. A handwritten note. "This is HOA property now. Deal with it." I stood there holding that note, feeling anger and disbelief. Who the hell did this guy think he was? Before I could call Grandpa, I heard his old Ford pickup coming down the drive. When Grandpa Hal stopped and saw my face, his expression grew serious. I handed him the note and explained what happened. Grandpa read it slowly, folded it carefully, and tucked it into his shirt pocket. "Jake," he said with a tone I'd never heard before, "do you know that I used to be a combat engineer in Vietnam?" I shook my head. In all my 25 years, Grandpa had never talked much about the war. "Well," he continued, studying the tire tracks Chad's truck had left in the gravel, "seems like it might be time you learned a few things about strategy." That evening, Grandpa told me stories I'd never heard. Harold Thompson hadn't just been a farmer all his life. He'd spent 2 tours in Vietnam as a combat engineer, building bridges and clearing obstacles. After the war, he'd used his GI benefits to buy heavy machinery and expand the ranch. "The thing about bullies, Jake," he said, rocking in his chair, "is they always underestimate the people they're picking on. They see what they want to see. Just some old farmer and his grandson. They don't see the guy who spent 3 years outsmarting the Viet Cong." I'd always known Grandpa was tough, but I was starting to realize there were depths I'd never suspected. The next morning, Chad was back. Same truck, same spot, same attitude. But this time, I was ready. I'd done some research. Chad Morrison had quite the interesting history. Public records showed he'd been a police officer for Austin PD until about 2 years ago. His separation hadn't been voluntary, multiple complaints for excessive force and inappropriate conduct. After that, he'd bounced between security companies before landing this HOA gig. The best part, the woman who'd hired him, Margaret Morrison Blackwell, wasn't just the HOA board president, she was also his mother-in-law. Chad's wife had divorced him around the time he lost his police job, but Margaret kept him around as her personal attack dog. The whole setup stank of nepotism and small-town politics. But the real game changer came when my girlfriend Emily showed up that afternoon. Emily Rodriguez was in her last year at UT Law, working part-time at a local firm specializing in property rights. She was smart, tough, and had zero tolerance for bullies like Chad. When I told her what happened, her dark eyes flashed with anger. "Jake, this is completely illegal. You can't just park on someone's property and claim HOA jurisdiction." Emily spent the next few hours on her laptop, cross-referencing property records, HOA bylaws, and city ordinances. What she found was fascinating. The Thompson Ranch had been here long before any HOA existed. Our property rights were grandfathered in under county law. More importantly, the road Chad was claiming as HOA property was actually a private easement that belonged to us. "Here's the thing," Emily explained, spreading maps and documents on our kitchen table. "The HOA has no legal authority to regulate your property. Zero. You're not part of their community, you never agreed to their bylaws, and they can't block access to your own land." Grandpa leaned over her shoulder, studying the paperwork with interest. "So what you're saying is, this Chad fellow is trespassing?" Emily nodded. "Not only trespassing, but potentially engaging in harassment and intimidation. There are serious civil and criminal violations here." Grandpa smiled, not his usual warm grandfather's smile, but something colder. "Well then, sounds like we need to document these violations properly." The next morning, I was ready with a camera when Chad pulled up, but something was different. Margaret Morrison Blackwell was with him. I'd seen her picture in the local paper, but in person, she was even more intimidating. Margaret was in her mid-60s, with silver hair pulled back severely, and the kind of outfit that screamed expensive. She wore pearls. At 10 in the morning, on a ranch road, when she stepped out of Chad's truck, she looked around our property like she'd found something unpleasant. "You must be the Thompson boy," she said, not bothering to introduce herself. Her accent was pure money, affected upper-class drawl that said she'd been practicing being better than other people for decades. "I'm Jake Thompson, ma'am. This is my family's ranch." Margaret sniffed. "Yes, well, that's what we need to discuss. Your little farm here is becoming quite the eyesore for our community. Property values in Pine Creek Estates are suffering because of this." She gestured vaguely at our ranch like it was a personal insult. I felt my blood pressure rising. "Ma'am, with all due respect, we've been here for 100 years. Your community's about 5 years old. We were here first." Chad stepped forward, his hand resting on what looked like a police-style radio. "Listen here, Junior. Mrs. Morrison Blackwell is trying to be nice. The HOA board has been reviewing zoning for this entire area. There are options being discussed at the county level. Eminent domain, public good, you understand?" I didn't understand, but I was getting angry. "Are you threatening to have our land taken away?" Margaret held up a manicured hand. "No one's threatening anything, dear. We're simply exploring all options to maintain the character and value of our community. Perhaps you'd be interested in selling? I'm sure we could work out a fair price." What happened next surprised me. Instead of getting angry, I started laughing. Not because anything was funny, but because the whole situation was so absurd. Here were these two people, standing on my family's land, telling me we were ruining their neighborhood and should consider selling because our rooster was too loud. "Ma'am," I said when I stopped chuckling, "I appreciate your concern, but this ranch isn't for sale. It's been in my family for 4 generations. This is our home." Margaret's smile turned icy. "How unfortunate. Well, I suppose we'll just have to see what legal remedies are available." Chad nodded and made a note. "Daily security patrols will continue. For the safety and security of Pine Creek Estates, of course." They climbed back into Chad's truck and drove off, but not before Chad called out, "Oh, and farm boy, that rooster of yours? The HOA noise ordinance says no livestock sounds before 7 a.m. or after 8 p.m. I'll be monitoring that real close." As their truck disappeared, I realized this was bigger than just Chad being a jerk. This was organized, a campaign to drive us out. I pulled out my phone to call Emily, but before I could dial, I heard another engine, Grandpa's old Ford. But he wasn't alone. There was another truck following him. When they both stopped, Grandpa got out along with a man I didn't recognize. A big guy in his 50s wearing a khaki uniform with a badge. "Jake," Grandpa called, "I want you to meet Sheriff Johnson. Bob's an old friend from the service. We served together in the Mekong Delta." Sheriff Johnson extended his hand. "Pleasure to meet you, son. Your grandfather's told me you folks are having some trouble with the HOA crowd." I shook his hand, confused. "Well, yes, sir, but I didn't know Grandpa had called you." Grandpa grinned. "Oh, I didn't call him about that. I called him about something much more interesting." Sheriff Johnson pulled a folder from his truck and handed it to me. "Your grandfather asked me to run a background check on Chad Morrison. Thought you might find the results illuminating." I opened the folder and my stomach turned. Chad's police record was worse than I'd thought. Multiple excessive force complaints, 2 suspensions, and a final incident involving inappropriate conduct toward a female victim. A note from his commanding officer caught my attention. "Officer Morrison displays concerning patterns of obsessive behavior and has difficulty accepting civilian authority. Recommend psychological evaluation." The guy wasn't just an asshole. He was a potentially dangerous asshole. Sheriff Johnson pointed to another page. "He's not even employed by the HOA. He's employed by Margaret Morrison Blackwell personally, through her private security company. Legally speaking, he has about as much authority as a mall cop. So when he claims to be enforcing HOA regulations, he's basically cosplaying." Sheriff Johnson finished. "The HOA board approved some security patrol, but Chad's interpretation goes way beyond anything they authorized." The next morning brought Chad's first major escalation. I woke to voices and music from our front gate. Looking out, I couldn't believe what I saw. Chad's truck was there, but so were 3 other vehicles. They were having a barbecue, a full-blown cookout with folding chairs, portable grill, cooler full of beer, and about 6 guys I'd never seen before. They'd set up right in front of our gate, blocking access to our property. When I stormed outside, with Grandpa behind me, I realized it was worse than it looked. They'd moved our gate posts to make room and scattered trash across our gravel drive. One of Chad's buddies, a heavy-set guy with tattoos, was grilling hamburgers on our property. "What the hell is this?" I shouted over the music. Chad looked up from his lawn chair, beer in hand. "Hey there, farm boy. Just having a little community gathering. HOA business, you understand?" His friends laughed. "This is private property," I said, trying to stay level. "You need to pack up and leave, now." Chad stood up slowly, making a show of it. "Well, that's the thing. We're having a discussion about property boundaries. According to county records, this road right here is actually a public easement. Has been since 1965. I felt Grandpa's warning hand on my shoulder. These jerks had invaded our land, moved our gate, and were literally having a party on our property. "Chad, I'm asking you one more time to leave. Peacefully." Chad exchanged looks with his buddies and they all chuckled. "Or what, Junior? You gonna call the cops? Newsflash, I know all the cops. He pulled out his phone and started dialing. My heart sank. If Chad really had police connections, they might side with him. But Grandpa stepped forward, calm as you please. Chad, was it? I'm Harold Thompson. This is my property. You and your friends are trespassing, you've damaged our gateposts, and you've littered on our land. I'm giving you 10 minutes to clean up and leave. Chad laughed out loud. Or what, old man? You gonna sick your grandson on me? Grandpa smiled that dangerous smile. Oh no, son, I'm gonna handle this myself. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Bob, it's Hal. Yeah, that situation we discussed has escalated. Multiple trespassers, property damage, and... Wait, is that marijuana I smell? I looked around and realized one of Chad's friends was smoking something that didn't smell like tobacco. Chad's face went pale. Bob, I think we need that deputy out here. And maybe animal control. One of these fellows might not be safe to drive. Grandpa ended the call and looked at Chad. Sheriff Johnson sends his regards. He'll be here in 5 minutes. Along with a deputy who specializes in public intoxication and property crimes. Suddenly, Chad's party didn't seem like such a good idea. His friends packed up quickly, throwing trash everywhere. But Chad wasn't done. As they loaded the grill, he got in my face. This isn't over, farm boy. The HOA board meets next week, and guess what's the top agenda item? Your little farm. Zoning violation, environmental impact. We're going to bury you in paperwork until you beg us to buy you out. I wanted to punch him so bad my fists were shaking. But Grandpa stepped between us. Chad, I think you better leave now. The sheriff doesn't like to be kept waiting. Sheriff Johnson arrived 10 minutes later. We showed him the damage, the trash, and I gave him a detailed account. He took photos, wrote up a report, and promised extra patrols. As he was leaving, he pulled me aside. Jake, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Chad's embarrassed now, and guys like him don't handle embarrassment well. Start documenting everything. Cameras, written records, witness statements. Build a case. I nodded, thinking about what Chad had said about the HOA board meeting. Sheriff, what can the HOA board actually do to us? Sheriff Johnson sighed. More than they should, not as much as they think. With the right connections at City Hall, they can make life difficult. File complaints, request inspections, lobby for zoning changes. It's all legal, but it's harassment if targeted at one property. As he drove away, I looked at the mess Chad had left. Beer cans, cigarette butts, grease stains on our gravel. But as I stood there, I noticed Grandpa was smiling. Why are you smiling? They trash our property. Grandpa bent down and picked up a beer can. Because, my boy, they just made their first major mistake. Emily found out what Grandpa meant by first major mistake when she arrived with legal documents and a camera. Texas has strict laws about property damage, trespassing, and public intoxication on private property. Every beer can, every cigarette butt, every grease stain was photographic evidence of criminal activity. Jake, this is actually great news, Emily said as she documented the damage. They escalated to criminal behavior. That gives us leverage we didn't have before. He spent 2 hours taking photos, measuring distances, cataloging every piece of trash. With Sheriff Johnson's report and this evidence, we can file charges: criminal trespass, vandalism, littering, possibly public intoxication. Grandpa nodded approvingly. Smart girl, Jake. You picked a good one. But our optimism was short-lived. When Emily tried to file charges the next day, she hit a wall. The desk sergeant was polite but dismissive. Ma'am, according to our records, there was no criminal activity reported at that address. Officer Morrison responded to a call about threatening behavior by the property owners, but no arrests were made. Emily's jaw dropped. Officer Morrison? Chad Morrison isn't a police officer. He's head of HOA security. The sergeant checked his computer. According to this report, Officer Chad Morrison responded to a disturbance call. The complainants declined to press charges. Emily leaned across the desk. Sergeant, Chad Morrison was fired from Austin PD 2 years ago. He's not law enforcement. The sergeant's expression didn't change. Ma'am, I can only go by what's in our system. If you'd like to file a complaint, you'll need to speak with Internal Affairs. When Emily called with the news, I felt sick. Chad had somehow gotten his police buddies to file a false report, making us look like the aggressors. This is insane, I told her. How is this legal? Emily's voice was tight with anger. It's not legal. It's fraud, filing a false police report, impersonating an officer. But it tells us Chad has deeper connections than we thought. Sheriff Johnson stopped by that evening. When we told him what happened, his face went dark. I was afraid of this. Chad's got friends on the force, guys who think like him. He paused carefully. What Chad did, filing that false report, it's a felony, but proving it will be nearly impossible. His word against yours, and he's got friends backing him up. I felt hopeless. So what do we do? Just let him get away with it? Sheriff Johnson looked at Grandpa, and some silent communication passed between them. Well, there are official channels, and then there are unofficial solutions. Grandpa rocked back in his chair. Bob's right, Jake. Sometimes you can't fight the system from the inside. Sometimes you have to beat it at its own game. The next few days passed quietly. Chad didn't park at our gate. No more surprise barbecues. I hoped maybe the police report had satisfied whatever point he was trying to make. But Emily was nervous. Jake, this feels like the calm before the storm. Guys like Chad don't just back down. She was right. It started small. Just feelings of being watched while working in the fields. Trucks that seemed to follow me into town. Phone calls that hung up when I answered. Then it got direct. Emily started getting text messages, at first innocent. Saw you at the coffee shop today. You looked nice. That's a pretty dress. But they escalated quickly. You could do better than that, farm boy. A smart girl like you shouldn't waste time on a loser. When Emily showed me the messages, my blood ran cold. The number was blocked, but we both knew who was sending them. Emily, you need to report this. She laughed bitterly. And tell them what? That the guy they just backed up with a false police report is stalking me? Jake, they're not going to help. The harassment continued for 2 weeks. Emily changed her number, but somehow Chad got the new one. Your boyfriend doesn't deserve you. I could protect you better than he can. You're making a mistake staying with him. Finally, Emily confronted Chad directly. Against my advice, she drove to the HOA office to file a formal complaint. What happened next makes my blood boil. Emily found Chad behind the reception desk. When she demanded to speak to Margaret Morrison, Blackwell, Chad smiled. She's not in, but I'm happy to help. What can the HOA do for you today, Emily? The way he said her name, familiar, possessive, made her skin crawl. I want you to stop sending me text messages, stop following me, stop harassing me. Chad's expression didn't change. I think you're confused. I don't know what you're talking about. Emily showed him the messages, but Chad held up his hand. Emily, I think you might be under stress. Dating Jake Thompson can't be easy. All that financial pressure, the legal troubles your family's having. Maybe you're imagining things. That's when Emily realized how deep this went. Chad knew about her family, her background, details he shouldn't have access to. How do you know about my family? Chad leaned back, completely relaxed. Emily, I'm in security. It's my job to know about potential threats to our community. Your boyfriend's family has been flagged as problematic. We're doing our due diligence. Emily stood to leave, but Chad's voice stopped her. Emily, you're smart. You're going to be a lawyer. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Don't let Jake Thompson drag you down. When his family loses that ranch, and they will, where's that going to leave you? Emily turned around, eyes flashing. Are you threatening me? Chad spread his hands innocently. Not at all. I'm offering you an opportunity, a fresh start. I could help you with that. The implication was clear. She left without another word, but Chad called after her. Think about it, Emily. You know where to find me when you're ready to be reasonable. When Emily told me what happened, I lost it completely. I wanted to hurt someone, really hurt them. I was halfway to my truck when Grandpa grabbed my arm. Jake, stop. Think. I spun around, anger pouring out. Think? Grandpa, he's stalking Emily. He's threatening her. Grandpa's grip tightened. And then what? You assault him, you go to jail, and he wins. Is that what you want? I wanted to argue, but I knew he was right. So what do we do? Let him get away with it? Grandpa's eyes had that dangerous look again. No, Jake. We don't let him get away with anything. But we do this smart. We do this right. He paused, looking toward the road where Chad's truck had been parked so many times. You know, I never told you the full story about that bridge in Vietnam. About what we did to Charlie after his 27th attempt to blow it up. I shook my head, still shaking with rage. We didn't just rebuild the bridge again, Jake. We built a trap. That night, Grandpa sat me down and told me about Operation Thunder Road, a mission in Vietnam that wasn't in any history books. The Viet Cong kept destroying our bridges, he explained, so we started building them to be destroyed. Fake bridges that looked real, but were designed to collapse when they put explosives on them. Meanwhile, we built the real bridges upstream, camouflaged and protected. I was starting to understand. You want us to give Chad a fake target? Grandpa smiled. I want us to give Chad exactly what he thinks he wants. Let him think he's winning while we prepare our real response. Over the next week, Grandpa put his plan into motion. It started with what looked like capitulation. Instead of confronting Chad when he returned to parking at our gate, we did nothing. We acted defeated, demoralized. I played my part, walking around with slumped shoulders, looking like a man who'd given up. Emily stayed away from the ranch, and when she did come over, she parked at the back of the property and snuck in through the fields. Meanwhile, Grandpa was making phone calls. Lots of phone calls. To old Army buddies, to local contractors, to the county planning office. When I asked what he was up to, he just winked. Reconnaissance, Jake. Know your enemy, know his weaknesses, know the terrain. Chad, thinking he'd broken us, got bolder. He started parking his truck overnight, leaving it at our gate from evening until morning. He began bringing friends again. Not for parties this time, but for what looked like surveillance. They'd sit in their trucks with binoculars, watching our house, taking notes. Emily's harassment escalated too. The text messages became more explicit, more threatening. I know where you live. I know your schedule. I know you're scared. When she finally went to the police again, they told her the same thing. No proof, no case. Sheriff Johnson tried to help, but his hands were tied. Jake, I can't make an arrest based on anonymous text messages and circumstantial evidence. Chad's being too careful. But Chad wasn't as careful as he thought. What he didn't know was that Emily had been working with a cybersecurity expert from her law firm. They'd been tracing the text messages, tracking IP addresses, building a digital paper trail that led straight back to Chad. Jake, we've got him, Emily told me excitedly one evening. The messages are being sent through a VPN, but there are metadata fingerprints that tie them to devices connected to the HOA office Wi-Fi. More importantly, we've got geolocation data that puts the sender at locations where Chad was confirmed to be. I felt hope for the first time in weeks. Can we use this to prosecute him? Emily's smile faded. That's the problem. The evidence is technically admissible, but getting it requires a warrant, and getting a warrant requires probable cause. And the police won't pursue probable cause because they don't think we have a case. It's a catch-22. That's when things took a dangerous turn. Chad, frustrated by our apparent submission, decided to escalate. He started coming onto our property when he thought we weren't home. We found footprints around our house. Evidence that someone had been peering through windows. Our mailbox was vandalized. Emily's car tires were slashed while she was visiting. But the worst incident happened on a Tuesday night in May. I was in town at a late meeting with our feed supplier when Chad made his move. Emily was alone at the ranch, studying for her bar exam in our kitchen. She heard a truck pull up around 9 p.m. and assumed it was me coming home. When she looked out the window and saw Chad's black Ram in our driveway, she panicked. Chad didn't just sit in his truck this time. He got out and walked right up to our front door, started knocking, then pounding. Emily, I know you're in there. We need to talk. Emily called me first, then 911, but I was 20 minutes away and the police response time to our area was even longer. Chad kept pounding on the door, shouting threats and demands. You can't avoid me forever, Emily. I'm trying to help you here. Your boyfriend's family is going down, and you can either go down with them or come with me. Emily barricaded herself in our bedroom with Grandpa's old hunting rifle and waited. For 45 minutes, Chad circled our house, looking through windows, trying doors, shouting threats and promises. I can protect you, Emily. I can give you everything that loser Jake can't. Don't make me do this the hard way. When I finally arrived, Chad was gone. But he'd left his mark. Our flower garden was destroyed, trampled flat. The windshield of Emily's car was shattered, and on our front door, scratched into the paint with a knife or key, was a message. Last chance. Emily was in shock, clutching that rifle like her life depended on it. When I tried to hold her, she flinched away. Jake, he's crazy, really crazy. He's not going to stop. I felt something break inside me. The woman I loved was terrorized, traumatized, because of some psychopath with a badge complex and a vendetta against my family. The police arrived 2 hours later, same desk sergeant who dismissed Emily's complaints before. He took a report, photographed the damage, but when Emily tried to explain about the stalking and harassment, he cut her off. Ma'am, did you actually see Mr. Morrison commit these acts of vandalism? Emily stared at him in disbelief. Are you serious? Who else would it be? The sergeant shrugged. Could have been anyone, kids maybe, someone with a grudge. Unless you have direct evidence linking Mr. Morrison to these crimes, there's not much we can do. I wanted to strangle that cop with my bare hands. What about the threats? The pattern of harassment? The sergeant's expression didn't change. What threats? According to our records, Mr. Morrison has been nothing but professional in his dealings with your family. If anything, you folks have been the aggressor." That's when I realized how deep Chad's connections really went. He wasn't just protected by a few cop buddies. He had the entire system rigged in his favor. After the police left, Emily broke down completely. "Jake, I can't do this anymore. I'm scared to come here. I'm scared to go home. I'm scared to walk to my car alone." I held her while she cried, feeling helplessness and rage war inside me. But when I looked up, I saw Grandpa standing in the doorway. He wasn't looking at us. He was looking out at the darkness where Chad's truck had been parked. His face was calm, but his eyes were the coldest thing I'd ever seen. "Emily, honey," he said quietly, "why don't you pack a bag and stay at your sister's place for a few days? Jake and I need to have a conversation." Emily looked up at him, tears still streaming down her face. "Mr. Thompson, I'm not going to let him drive me away from Jake. This is my fight, too." Grandpa smiled, and for the first time since this whole thing started, it was his warm grandfather's smile. "Oh, sweetheart, you're not going anywhere permanently. You're just going to be safe while Jake and I handle some business." He walked over to the closet and pulled out a dusty box I'd never seen before. When he opened it, I saw maps, photographs, and what looked like military planning documents. "Jake," he said, pulling out a manila folder, "it's time I told you about Operation Sweet Creek." Inside that dusty box was a lifetime of secrets. Maps of our property going back decades, legal documents, and military intelligence reports. But the most interesting thing was a folder marked Property Rights and Easements Confidential. Grandpa spread everything across our kitchen table like a general planning a campaign. "Jake, what do you know about Sweet Creek?" I looked at him blankly. Sweet Creek was just the little stream running through our back 40. I'd played there as a kid, caught crawfish, built dams. "Not much, Grandpa, it's been there forever." Grandpa smiled. "Forever is right, and according to Texas water rights law, it makes us very special." He pulled out a surveyor's map from 1923. "When your great-grandfather bought this land, Sweet Creek was the natural boundary. The HOA subdivision was built on the other side. Their property line ends at the water's edge." I studied the map, trying to understand. "So we own the creek?" Grandpa's smile widened. "We own the creek bed, and 20 feet on both sides. Water rights, mineral rights, access rights, everything." He pulled out another document. "Chad's been parking specifically in a spot that's perfect for what the Army Corps of Engineers calls a strategic relocation." I was starting to get it. "You mean we can legally move his truck?" Grandpa chuckled. "According to Texas property law, any vehicle abandoned on private property for more than 72 hours becomes the legal responsibility of the property owner. We can impound it, store it, and charge storage fees." I felt excitement building. "But Chad moves it every few days." Grandpa's eyes twinkled. "Does he? Are you sure?" The next morning, Grandpa showed me what he meant. Chad's truck was parked in its usual spot, but something was different. Then Grandpa handed me binoculars. "Look at the license plate." I focused and nearly dropped them. Same make, model, and color as Chad's Ram 2500, but it wasn't the same truck. Different license plate, different rims, different window tint. "Grandpa, that's not Chad's truck." Grandpa nodded approvingly. "This truck belongs to Jimmy Patterson, one of Chad's drinking buddies." I lowered the binoculars, confused. "But why?" Grandpa's smile was predatory. "Because Chad thinks he's getting smart. He's rotating vehicles. Different truck, different owner, same harassment." But Grandpa had been documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, license plate numbers. He'd recorded every vehicle, every visitor, every incident. "Jake, I want you to meet someone." That afternoon, a woman in her 50s arrived wearing a business suit. "This is Margaret Sullivan. She's what they call a demolition lawyer." Margaret Sullivan looked like someone you didn't want to face in court. Sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a handshake that said she'd crushed stronger men for breakfast. "Mr. Thompson, what Mr. Morrison and the HOA have been doing isn't just harassment. It's racketeering." She opened her briefcase. "I specialize in cases where local authorities have been corrupted. Your Chad Morrison is small time compared to some cases I've handled." Margaret spent 2 hours reviewing everything. The text messages, property damage, false police reports, the escalation pattern. What really got her attention was Grandpa's documentation of the vehicle rotation scheme. "This is excellent evidence of organized harassment. In federal court, this would qualify as conspiracy under RICO statutes." As if on cue, Emily's phone buzzed. This message was different. Direct. "Time's up. 24 hours to convince your boyfriend to sell. After that, things get unpleasant. Margaret photographed it. That's a direct threat. We can get a restraining order. But Grandpa shook his head. Restraining orders don't stop men like Chad. They just make them more careful. Margaret sensed undercurrents she didn't understand. Mr. Thompson, what exactly are you planning? Grandpa walked to the window, looking at the truck at our gate. Miss Sullivan, you handle the legal side. Jake and I are going to handle the practical side. That dangerous look was back in his eyes. Chad wants to play games with property rights? Fine, let's play. I wanted to stay with Grandpa, but he wasn't taking no for an answer. Emily's the priority, Jake. Chad's unstable, and if this goes wrong, she's the one who's really in danger. Emily was pacing the kitchen, nervous energy radiating from her. Jake, what's happening out there? I heard trucks. I explained what we'd seen, and Emily's face went pale. We need to call 911. I shook my head. Emily, they're not coming. Not in time. Before I could say more, Chad's voice boomed through a bullhorn. Jake, Thompson, get out here. We need to talk. Emily grabbed my arm. Don't go. It's what he wants. Outside, Chad kept shouting threats. I counted 6 vehicles, engines rumbling like hungry predators. That's when we heard the excavator starting up. Through the window, we saw its lights moving like the eyes of some metal beast. Chad's voice cracked with uncertainty. What the hell is that? Old man, you better not be doing something stupid. Emily and I moved to the front window. What we saw made my jaw drop. Grandpa sat in the excavator's cab, wearing his old army helmet, maneuvering the massive machine toward Chad's actual Ram 2500 parked at our gate. Chad and his buddies stood around their trucks, clearly not expecting this response. Is that old fool crazy? Chad shouted. He can't do that. But Grandpa stopped 10 feet from the truck and shut off the engine. The silence was deafening. Then his voice rang out across the darkness. Chad Morrison, you're trespassing on private property. 5 minutes to remove your vehicles and leave. Chad's response was immediate. Old man, this is HOA property. That's when Grandpa pulled out a bundle of official documents. According to these county survey, you are parked on Thompson family property. This vehicle has been abandoned here for more than 72 hours. Under Texas property code, I'm claiming salvage right. Chad was furious. That's bullshit. That truck hasn't been here 3 days. Grandpa smiled. Jimmy Patterson's truck hasn't. Your truck has been here since Monday morning. 78 hours and counting. He gestured to our security cameras, full video documentation available. Chad looked around wildly, realizing he'd been outmaneuvered. Instead of backing down, he pulled out his fake badge. I'm placing you under citizen's arrest. He'd made it halfway to the excavator when headlights flooded the area. Sheriff Department vehicles approached fast, 4 patrol cars and Sheriff Johnson's truck, all with emergency lights flashing. Everyone freeze, hands where we can see them. Chad stopped dead as officers poured out with weapons drawn. Sheriff Johnson stepped forward with his own bullhorn. Chad Maurice, my son, drop the fake badge and step away. Sheriff Johnson, this maniac is trying to steal my truck. The sheriff laughed harshly. Your truck? Chad, that truck is registered to Margaret Morrison Blackwell. She reported it stolen 3 hours ago. I felt Emily's hand grip mine as the pieces fell into place. Chad looked desperate, surrounded, and screwed. That's impossible. Margaret gave me permission. Sheriff Johnson nodded to his deputies. She just signed a sworn statement saying she's never given you permission to take any of her vehicles. She's pressing charges for theft, harassment, and fraud. Chad's eyes darted around like a trapped animal. This is a setup, Sheriff Johnson sighed. Chad, you're under arrest for vehicle theft, harassment, stalking, trespassing, impersonating a police officer, and about a dozen other charges. That's when Chad lost it completely. He lunged toward his truck, probably thinking he could escape, but he'd forgotten about the excavator and Grandpa. What happened next was poetry in motion. As Chad ran, Grandpa fired up the excavator. The massive machine swung into action, its bucket sweeping in a perfect arc. It didn't hit Chad. Grandpa was too precise. Instead, it scooped up the entire front end of the Ram like picking up a toy. The truck's rear wheels left the ground as the excavator lifted it 8 feet into the air. Chad stopped and stared at his truck, dangling above Sweet Creek. What the hell are you doing? Grandpa's voice was calm now. Just helping you understand property rights, son. This truck was abandoned on my property, making it my responsibility to dispose of properly. He maneuvered so the truck hung directly over the deepest part of Sweet Creek. Now, I could haul it to an impound lot for $500, or the truck swayed gently above the dark water. Sheriff Johnson was grinning. "Chad, I'd listen to what Mr. Thompson has to say," Chad panicked. "You can't do this. That's destruction of property." Grandpa tilted his head thoughtfully. "Is it? Technically, this vehicle was abandoned on my property. Under Texas law, I have the right to dispose of abandoned property as I see fit. Plus, there's all the damages you've caused. I figure this truck's value covers what you owe me." Chad's face turned purple. "I'll sue you." "I'll have your ranch," Sheriff Johnson interrupted. "Chad, you're about to be charged with enough felonies to put you away for 10 years. You're not suing anyone." Grandpa glanced at the sheriff. "Bob, any legal requirement to preserve stolen property as evidence?" Sheriff Johnson pretended to consider. "Well, Hal, we've got plenty of evidence. Photos, video, witness statements. One more photo for the case file would be sufficient." Emily and I watched as Grandpa slowly opened the excavator's bucket. Chad's truck tilted forward, teetered, then crashed into Sweet Creek with a tremendous splash that echoed off the hills. Chad let out a wail like someone had killed his dog. "My truck! You destroyed my truck!" Grandpa climbed down with dignity. "Your truck? Thought you said it was Margaret's." Chad charged toward Grandpa, but deputies grabbed him before he took 3 steps. As they handcuffed him, Chad screamed threats and curses, but his words were drowned out by applause. Not just from us, but from neighbors who'd emerged from the darkness to watch. Sheriff Johnson walked over to Grandpa. "Hal, that was beautiful, completely legal, fully justified, and absolutely perfect." 6 months later, Chad Morrison was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Margaret Morrison Blackwell paid for all damages plus substantial settlement for harassment. She disbanded the HOA security program and became an unexpected friend. Emily passed the bar and started her own practice. Our ranch is peaceful now. We use that spot by the creek for family barbecues where Emily loves telling visitors about the night Grandpa taught a small-town dictator about gravity and property rights. And every time I hear Sweet Creek flowing, I remember the most valuable lesson Grandpa taught me. Never underestimate a 78-year-old farmer with an excavator and 40 years of experience teaching fools about boundaries.